In Norway, if something is wild or chaotic, they literally call it Texas. That is not a joke. It is real informal Norwegian slang. The state's reputation got so extreme that another language turned it into an adjective. Texas is the only U.S. state that has ever achieved that. But here's what most people do not realize. The Norwegians might be understating it. Because this state has a single ranch bigger than Rhode Island, the fastest legal speed limit in the entire Western Hemisphere, a town that sold its own name for free satellite TV, and a power grid so independent that 30 million people cannot call for help when it fails. These are not just fun facts. They reveal what happens when an entire state is built on the principle of more and bigger, and nobody tells us what to do. So let's start with the most basic extreme, size itself. A state bigger than nations. Texas covers roughly 268,820 square miles. That makes it larger than France, larger than Spain, larger than Germany, larger than any single country in Europe. It is the second largest U.S. state by area and the second largest by population, home to more than 31 million people. You could fit entire nations inside its borders and still have room left over. The scale is hard to process until you try to drive across it. El Paso, on the far western tip, is closer to San Diego, California than it is to Houston. A trip from the Panhandle to the southern tip at Brownsville covers more distance than driving from Chicago to New Orleans. The state is so wide that it spans 2 time zones. Most Americans know Texas is big, but very few grasp just how big, because the comparisons stop making sense. You run out of countries to measure it against. But Texas does not just contain big things. Individual properties inside Texas are bigger than entire countries. King Ranch. In South Texas covers roughly 825,000 acres, about 1,289 square miles. That is larger than the entire state of Rhode Island, larger than the nation of Luxembourg. And this is not a national park or a military reservation. It is a single working cattle operation founded in 1853 by a steamboat captain named Richard King, who bought the land from a Spanish land grant. The ranch has been running continuously for over 170 years. At its peak, it was even larger than it is today, and the property still operates its own network of roads, buildings, and infrastructure, essentially a small civilization unto itself. It developed its own breed of cattle, the Santa Gertrudis, the first new cattle breed ever developed in the Western Hemisphere. It even produced a Salt, a Triple Crown winning racehorse in 1946. One ranch bigger than a country with its own cattle breed and a champion thoroughbred. That alone would be enough to justify the Norwegian slang. But what happens on that land is equally extreme. 11 million and counting Texas has more farms and more farmland than any other state in America. The numbers are staggering. Over 247,000 farms spread across more than 126 million acres of agricultural land. Grazing across that land are more than 11 million cattle and calves, the largest herd in the country by a wide margin. If those cattle formed their own nation, it would be the 80th most populous country on Earth. This is not a relic of cowboy mythology. It is an industrial-scale operation that shapes the state's politics, water use, land policy, and culture every single day. Drive through the Texas Panhandle and you will see feedlots stretching to the horizon, tens of thousands of animals at a single facility, surrounded by grain silos and processing plants. The ranching economy is not nostalgic. It is relentless, and the ripple effects shape everything downstream, literally. Texas beef moves through a network of meatpacking plants and distribution centers that feed the country. The state leads the nation in cattle production by such a wide margin that the next closest state is not even close. When Texas has a drought, beef prices rise nationwide. When Texas ranchers make decisions about land use, it reshapes the water table for millions of people who have never set foot on a ranch. But Texas does not just go big with land and livestock. It goes fast. A 41-mile stretch of State Highway 130 running between Austin and Seguin has a posted speed limit of 85 miles per hour. It is the fastest legal speed limit anywhere in the United States, and in the entire Western Hemisphere. No other state allows it. No other country in North or South America allows it. It is a toll road, privately operated, cutting through flat central Texas ranch land where the horizon just keeps going. At 85 miles per hour, you cover a mile in about 42 seconds. The landscape barely changes. Fences, grass, sky. The road was designed for speed because the terrain allows it, and Texas saw no reason to pretend otherwise. The road tells you everything about how Texas thinks. If the pavement is straight enough and you are willing to pay, why slow down? That attitude, we do things our own way, is not new. It is baked into the state's identity, literally since before Texas was a state. If you want to see how geography shapes where Americans live, subscribe. The Republic That Never Forgot. From 1836 to 1845, Texas was an independent country. Not a territory, not a colony, a sovereign republic with its own president, its own army, and its own foreign embassies. It joined the United States by formal treaty, not simple annexation, a legal distinction Texans have never forgotten and never let anyone else forget. Before American statehood, 5 other nations had controlled parts of Texas: Spain, France, Mexico, the Confederacy, and the United States. 6 different flags have flown over this land. That is not a metaphor. It is the literal origin of the entire Six Flags theme park chain. The original Six Flags over Texas, which opened in Arlington in 1961, themed each section of the park to one of the 6 ruling nations. A piece of Texas history so potent that it became a multi-billion-dollar entertainment brand with parks across the country. Only in Texas does a political identity become an amusement park. But that same fierce independence created something far more serious than a theme park. Everything I have told you so far is impressive or entertaining. This next fact has life or death stakes for over 26 million people. About 90% of the electricity consumed in Texas runs through ERCOT, the Electric Reliability Council of Texas. That power grid is almost completely disconnected from the 2 major grids serving the rest of the country. Texas built its own grid on purpose, specifically to avoid federal regulation. The trade-off is real, with competitive electricity markets, regulatory freedom, and lower prices in normal conditions. But it also means that when demand spikes, during a winter storm or during a brutal summer heat wave, Texas cannot easily import power from neighboring states. The rest of America has a backup plan built into the system. Texas chose not to have one. That choice is the reason the February 2021 winter storm became a catastrophe. Temperatures plunged across the state, natural gas pipelines froze, power plants went offline, and the grid came within minutes of a total collapse that could have left the state without electricity for weeks. Millions of Texans lost power for days in freezing temperatures. Pipes burst in homes that had never been winterized because nobody expected them to need it. People burned furniture to stay warm. Grocery stores went dark. Hospitals ran on emergency generators until those generators ran out of fuel too. The death toll climbed into the hundreds. Some people froze to death in their own bedrooms. The independent grid that was supposed to represent freedom became a trap because when the system broke, there was no one to call. Independence has a price, and in that month, Texas paid it in full. But Texas's extremes are not all man-made. Nature matches the state's energy pound for pound. 20 million wings at dusk. We have covered what humans built in Texas. What nature built here might be even more extraordinary. Outside San Antonio, in a limestone sinkhole called Bracken Cave, 15 to 20 million Mexican free-tailed bats gather every summer. That is likely the largest colony of bats on Earth, and one of the biggest concentrations of any mammal species anywhere. At dusk, the emergence begins. The bats pour out of the cave mouth in a spiraling column so dense it shows up on weather radar, and air traffic controllers in San Antonio have to account for it. The stream can take 3 to 4 hours to fully empty. From a distance, it looks like smoke rising from the ground. A living tornado of wings climbing into the darkening sky, spreading across the horizon in every direction as millions of animals fan out to hunt. Every single night, that colony consumes hundreds of thousands of pounds of insects, including agricultural pests that would otherwise devastate Texas crops. Scientists estimate the colony saves regional farmers billions of dollars in reduced crop damage and pesticide costs. But suburban development around San Antonio is creeping closer to the cave entrance. If that colony is disrupted by light pollution, by noise, by habitat loss, the agricultural and ecological consequences would ripple across the entire state. When a state operates at this scale, both human and natural, it starts producing things nobody can fully explain. In the West Texas desert near the tiny town of Marfa, color-shifting orbs have been reported dancing above the horizon since at least 1883. Ranchers, travelers, and soldiers all described mysterious lights hovering and splitting apart in the darkness east of the Shinati Mountains. The phenomenon became famous enough that the state built an official viewing area along Highway 90. Scientists have explained some sightings as atmospheric refractions of distant headlights and campfires, but longtime observers insist that not all of the lights can be accounted for by those explanations. Over 140 years later, nobody has a definitive answer. The desert keeps its secrets. And just 2 years after those first Marfa sightings, in 1885, a pharmacist at Morrison's Old Corner drugstore in Waco created Dr. Pepper, America's oldest major soft drink, beating Coca-Cola to market by about a year. Texas did not just build the biggest ranch and the fastest highway, it invented the original American soda. Of all the strange things Texas has produced, nothing captures the state's anything goes attitude quite like what happened in a tiny community north of Fort Worth. In 2005, a small town called Clark, Texas, with a population of around 200, officially renamed itself Dish, as in Dish Network, the satellite TV company. In exchange, every household in town received 10 years of free basic satellite TV service, plus the equipment to run it. A town literally traded its identity for free cable. The mayor at the time argued it was a practical decision because residents needed the infrastructure and could not afford it otherwise. But the deal tells you something fundamental about Texas. Even identity is negotiable if the terms are right. The town is still called Dish today. The free TV ended years ago. The name stuck. But not every Texas extreme is something to laugh about. One of them is the deadliest natural disaster in American history, and it reframes everything else in this video. On September 8, 1900, a hurricane struck the island city of Galveston with winds estimated at over 140 miles per hour and a storm surge that swallowed the city whole. At the time, Galveston was one of the wealthiest cities in Texas, a booming port with grand Victorian mansions, electric streetcars, and the first telephone service in the state. None of that mattered. At least 8,000 people died, and some estimates run as high as 12,000. To this day, the Galveston hurricane remains the single deadliest natural disaster in United States history, worse than any earthquake, any tornado, any other hurricane before or since. In a single night, the storm destroyed more than 3,600 buildings and left the city in ruins. Bodies washed out to sea and piled in the streets. Entire neighborhoods vanished as if they had never existed. The storm did not just destroy a city. It ended Galveston's trajectory as a major American port and financial center, shifting development 40 miles inland to Houston, which would go on to become the fourth largest city in the country. And Texas responded the way Texas always responds, by building bigger. Engineers constructed a 17-foot seawall along the Gulf Shore. Then they launched one of the most audacious civil engineering projects in American history, a grade-raising effort that lifted the entire city of Galveston by as much as 8 feet, jacking up thousands of buildings and filling in the ground beneath them with dredged sand. Disaster at a massive scale met with engineering at a massive scale. The pattern holds. The statue that refused to stay down. Every year, the State Fair of Texas sprawls across 270 acres in Dallas, drawing millions of visitors through its gates. Standing guard at the entrance is Big Tex, a 55-foot-tall cowboy statue in boots and a 10-gallon hat, the unofficial mascot of everything Texas represents. In 2012, Big Tex caught fire. Electrical wiring in the structure sparked, and the statue burned to its steel frame in front of stunned fair-goers, smoke rising into the October sky. Texas rebuilt it bigger. That impulse to go larger, go faster, go more independent, go more extreme, and then double down. When something breaks is not just a personality trait. It is a governing philosophy. It produced the world's biggest bat colony and a power grid that answers to no one. It produced a ranch bigger than a country and a town that sold its own name. It produced the fastest highway in the hemisphere and the deadliest natural disaster in American history, followed by the engineering project to make sure it never happened again. Norwegians call it Texas. Texans just call it Tuesday. If you liked the video, feel free to check out another one.